Okay, so in this video, in this series of videos, we'll be making use of the Tweepy API, and this is an API that we can access via Python, which will allow us to very easily stream tweets in real time directly from Twitter. So in order to follow this series of tutorials, what we're going to be doing is installing Tweepy, which is a Python package. So I'm going to assume that you have Python installed on your machine, and if so, all we'll need is the Tweepy module. So let me just give a brief overview of what we'll cover in at least this video. This video, we're just going to create a Python, we are going to create some Python. We're going to first create a Twitter application, and in order to do that, you will also require a Twitter account. So if you don't have a Twitter account, go ahead and create one. It's pretty easy to do. Doesn't need to be a main Twitter account or anything like that. You just need to sign up for Twitter in whatever way you wish to do so. Once you do that, you will have the ability to create a Twitter application, and then we'll write Python code that will interface with that application to stream tweets in real time based on keywords or hashtags. Now, what we'll do in this video is we'll just write a very simple application to accomplish just that. So we'll see tweets given a set of keywords. And then in later subsequent videos, we'll see what we can do to analyze the content of the tweets that we get back. Maybe we can produce some nice graphs based on that data, and then some other fun things that we can do with that data, like possibly sentiment analysis, which will most likely be part of the natural language processing series of videos. So keep an eye out for that as well. So I guess one thing that I want to mention as well is that all of the code, as usual, for all of these things will be provided on my GitHub page, and all of the links that I'm talking about here, all of the links that I have open on this browser, are going to be available below in the description. So no need to write them down, but just refer to that and you can see the code that we use in this and all videos. Another thing I want to mention too is that if you have any problems or questions about Tweepy, which is the primary module that we will be using in this tutorial series, the documentation is docs.tweepy.org. Again, link will be in the description, and more further information about this module is there, and it's very descriptive and well written, so I will refer you to that. So before we get into writing any Python code, as I mentioned, we need to actually go ahead and create a Twitter application. So in order to do that, what we need to do is navigate over to apps.twitter.com. Again, this will require that you do have a Twitter account and are logged in. If so, you should be presented with a dashboard that looks probably similar to this, depending on what time when you're watching this video. You can see that I already have an application here listed under my Twitter apps that was used for something else I was working on just for fun. And then what you're going to want to do, you might not see anything here. If you don't have any apps in this application management section, you can click on this Create New App button. That will take you to a form which just asks for some really simple details about what this Twitter application is going to be doing. So I've already kind of did a dry run of this, and I have some information for what we'll be filling in. So you can put in whatever name you like. I'm going to put in this name. This is just the name of the Twitter application, Lucid Programming Twitter app. A description, which is also required. So I'm just going to say a test Twitter application for a YouTube tutorial, and then a website. So I'm just going to put in my own homepage here, just for good measure, I suppose. Callback URL, this is not particularly necessary, so we'll just leave this blank. Make sure you click this developer agreement, and then you can click on create your Twitter application. So if you do so, then you are presented hopefully with this page that says your application has been created, and all of the relevant information for your application will be stored here in terms of how to access credentials and things like that. So what you're going to want to do is actually click on the settings tab right here. So if you do so, you will see you'll see four things listed: consumer key, consumer secret, access token, and access secret. I'm not going to click on that because the keys are unique to each program, and I guess showing those things is, I think it's against, well, it might be in poor taste. I don't exactly know if there's any like security breach if I show those things, but I guess just for good measure, I'm just going to let you click on that yourself, look at what those are, keep them secret, and then we're going to use those to interface with our application. I guess for one thing, if you do have a Twitter application that's interfacing with Twitter, you wouldn't want somebody to get access to your tokens, because then they could manipulate it and they could possibly abuse it, and that wouldn't look good for your Twitter account. So try not to let that happen. So we're going to use those 4 credentials to authenticate the Python program that we will now be writing. So with that said, minimize this and let's get to writing some code. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a credentials file, which is going to store those 4 things, which you should see on your settings tab. So I'm going to create this as Twitter credentials.py. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to create some variables which will be accessed in our primary program. So I'll just put in a comment, variables that contain the user credentials to access Twitter API. So the first one is access token. The next is access token secret. There's also the consumer, let me spell it properly, the consumer key and the consumer secret. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, I'm going to define each of these as just Python strings. So I'm just going to assume that you can go over to the settings tab, back to here, click on the settings tab, and then copy and paste in between these quotes the access token secret, consumer key, and consumer secret. Save this file and make sure that this file is saved in the same directory that you'll be using all of your, that you'll be writing all of your Twitter API access Python code in. So I'm just going to save this right now. And that's that. So if I look here, I have Twitter credentials.py in this directory. In the same directory, I'm going to create another Python file, which will be the brains of what we'll be doing, which, as I mentioned before, will just be, in this video at least, streaming the tweets directly from Twitter in real time. So let's create a file which we'll call Tweepy streamer.py. So before we get into writing this, one thing that I probably should have mentioned earlier than I did is that, oops, that was not supposed to go there. Let's see, let's try that again. There we go. You need the Tweepy module, of course. So as I mentioned, I'm going to assume that you have Python installed. I won't assume that you have Tweepy installed. So if you don't have it installed, what you'll need to do is access it through pip install Tweepy. If you run this command in your terminal, it will go ahead and install. For me, I already have it installed, so it says requirement already satisfied. So sorry about that, I forgot to mention that earlier. So back to the code, so back to here. Let's go ahead and start importing some of the things that we'll be making use of that are coming from the Tweepy library. So the first thing that we'll import is tweepy.streaming, import stream listener. This is a class that's from the Tweepy module that will allow us to listen to the tweets, kind of the fire hose of tweets as they come based on certain keywords or hashtags. We'll also need to import another thing for authentication. So we'll say from Tweepy import OAuth handler. This class is going to be responsible for authenticating based on the credentials that we stored in the other file for associated with the Twitter app. And then we're going to have one more thing from Tweepy import stream. And I guess another import that we require not from Tweepy is the credentials file that we created. So import Twitter credentials. And again, this should be located in the same folder as this file that we're writing to currently. So the first thing that I want to do is I just want to create a class which will allow us to print the tweets. So a very simple thing, and then we'll go back over it and kind of make it a little bit more robust, and we'll refine what it's doing, but simple first. So let's create a class, and we'll call this standard out listener. And this class is going to actually inherit from stream listener. So it's going to inherit from the stream listener class, and the stream listener class provides methods that we can directly override. So one of the methods is called on_data. It's a class method that takes in a parameter data. And there's another one that we can also override called onError, which also is a class method and takes a status variable. So what do these functions do? What are they responsible for? OnData is an overridden method which will take in the data that is streamed in from the stream listener, so the one that is listening for tweets. and then it's going to print. We can do whatever we want with that data, that tweet. So what we're going to do, just to make it very simple, is we're going to print out the data that we get. And then we're just going to return true to make sure that everything went well. We will go back and make that a bit more robust because that's very simplistic at the moment. On error, this is what a method that we are overriding from the stream listener class that happens if there's an error that occurs. And one thing we can do, again, which is just very simple, is we can just print out the error, which is passed in through this status variable. We're just printing it on screen. So if we encounter an error, what will happen is this method will be triggered and will print the status message of that error to the screen. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is just actually create a method, an object from this standard out listener class that we just created, and then actually get on to streaming the tweets. So this will be in the main part of the program. So we'll say if name is equal to main. And what we'll first do is create a listener object. So I'm going to say listener is equal to standard out listener, like that. So again, this is just an object of the class that we just created, which is inheriting from the stream listener class. And then what we're going to do is we're going to want to authenticate. So we're going to want to authenticate using the credentials that we had stored in the other file. So we're going to create this variable called auth, and we're going to say auth handler, which is the class that we're importing from Tweepy, which is going to be responsible for actually authenticating our code. And we're going to pass it in the credentials. So we're going to say Twitter credentials dot consumer key and Twitter credentials dot consumer secret. So this, in order for us to define this auth object of the auth handler class, it takes these two arguments that we need to pass in. And then in order for us to complete the authentication process, we're going to say auth.set access token. And this is a method which is provided from the auth handler class. And what this takes, this method also takes two arguments, and that takes the access token and the access token secret. At this point, our application hopefully should be properly authenticated. So we'll create a Twitter stream based on the, so we'll call this, we'll create a variable called stream equal to this thing, which is the class stream that we imported above. And we're going to pass it two things: the authentication token to verify that we've actually authenticated properly, and then the listener object that we created. And the listener object is just responsible for how do I deal with the data, the tweets, and how do I deal with the error if I encounter an error. One final thing that we can do is we can filter the tweets, because otherwise if we just run this stream, if we run this listener, it's just going to stream a ton of tweets at us, which might be, some of them might be interesting, some of them might not be. Let's say we want to stream tweets that are focused on some keywords or hashtags or something like that. So what we can do is we can say stream.filter. This is a method that is also provided by the stream class, and what this takes is a list. One of the things it can take is an optional parameter of a list, which is called track. And in this track list, we can provide it a list of things which, if the tweet contains any of these list objects, then it will apply it and it will say, I'll add this to the stream. So let's see, let's just add Donald Trump, let's Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama, and let's say Bernie Sanders. So just some politicians in there. So we'll filter tweets based on this list of keywords. So we can go ahead and write this to a file, and then we can go ahead and try to see what happens when we run it. So Python Tweepy streamer. Now if we run this, we get, let's see, a 401. Let's check why that happens to be. I think the reason for that was because I didn't fill in any of the consumer key, consumer secret, or anything like that. I had just written it. From what you saw before, all of those things were completely blank, so don't be me, don't be an idiot. Go ahead and make sure you fill that stuff in. And once you do, if you do that, hopefully that should run and things should start coming on the screen there. So like we see a ton of seemingly garbage just showing up on the screen here. These are tweets. Specifically, these are, let me just kind of stop this here. So if you don't stop it, it'll just keep streaming. So this whole blob here, this is one tweet. It's not the person didn't tweet this thing out, of course. What this is it's a JSON formatted dictionary object, and each of the fields in this braced thing here contains information about the tweet. So this says the tweet was created today. This is today. This is the ID that Twitter associates with this particular tweet. Apparently it was a retweet by this person here. Here is the actual text. So Donald Trump, that's one of the keywords that we had in the list check. So 2019 State of the Union speech is January 30th. TV ratings. So yeah, there's just some stuff that he's saying there. What other content do we have on this thing that's interesting? Let's see. So it tells you also about like who retweeted it, how many times it's been retweeted. There's a whole ton of information in this little thing here. I think even the platform coordinates possibly of where this was tweeted from in some cases. Sometimes that's not provided, but there's a ton of information in this thing. So there's one tweet here, and what we're going to be doing in subsequent videos is actually going through each of these and seeing if we can extract anything interesting, any insights from these things, and just kind of have some fun with it. So back to the code. So what we have at this point is just something that prints out tweets to the screen, which is totally fine. That it's proof of concept. We've got tweets coming in, but I'm just going to clean some of this up to make this a bit more robust, so that in subsequent videos things are just kind of a little bit more, well, robust, I guess is the right word. So let's go and create another class, which let's call this Twitter streamer. So this is going to be a class that we'll define for ourselves, which will be responsible for actually streaming the tweets. Just makes it a little bit more concise. So we'll call this stream tweets, and this is a class method, so it takes the object of self. I'm kind of thinking ahead here and assuming that instead of just printing tweets to the terminal like we saw there, perhaps I want to save tweets to a text file or a JSON file, so that way I can process them for whatever purpose I see fit later. So I'm going to allow the ability for us to pass in a name, which will be the file name of the tweets that we'll pass in. So let's say fetched tweets file name, I'll call that. So again, that's just the file name of where we want to, let's say, write our tweets to instead of showing them on the terminal. We can do both, but we don't have to. And then I'll also have a hashtag list here. So this will just be the list of keywords or hashtags that we wish to filter the tweets out by. So we're really just kind of reworking some of the code that we have that's the proof of concept into something that's a little bit more modular. So let's go ahead and add a comment just to make this look a little nicer. This handles Twitter authentication and the connection to the Twitter streaming API. So we're going to pretty much just take this code that we wrote down here, and I think we're just gonna, let's just copy that, even remove it, move that over here. Let's go ahead and indent that. So we'll create the listener object. That's all good. Authenticate, do that. So instead of hard coding this here, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this, and I'm going to put in the hashtag list that we passed into the function. So a bit more modular, so we can just create a Twitter streamer object instead of doing that whole business that we had before in the main part of the code. Another thing that I guess I want to do in this standard out listener class that we defined is, well, let's see, let me just add a few more comments here. So I want to add a comment for this class. This class is a class for streaming and let's say processing live tweets. That looks good. And then here, let's do another one. This is a basic listener class that just prints, at this moment anyway, that just prints received tweets to standard out. So that might change over time as we make this more complicated. So I guess the first thing that we'll do is we'll create a constructor for this thing, because what I want to do is I want to create a standard out listener class, or object rather, and that may be associated with a file name that these are going to be writing to. So where do we want to store the tweets? So I'm going to say fetched tweets file name, And this is a class variable, so I'm going to say self.fetchTweets file name is equal to fetched tweets file name. So this onData method is a little bit, it could use a little bit of something to make it a little bit better at dealing with possible errors. So I'm going to have a try except statement here. So I'm going to say try, let's say print data. And then actually, I'm not going to put anything, well, okay, let's say that we also want to write this stuff to a file too, right? So we've already created this file name that we've defined the constructor of this class. Let's say with open self.fetched tweets file name, and we'll append because we want to continually add the tweets as we stream them from the API as tf. We'll write the data. So tf.write data. So if you don't want to print it out and also write it, you can get rid of that print statement, but it's totally up to you. If that went okay, we'll return true, and then we'll have an except case here. So except, we'll say base exception, and then if that exception is hit, we'll say print error on data, just to make sure that we know the method that we are in. And then let's go ahead and print out, let's print out the actual error message. So we'll print out the string of E. And then we'll return true. Okay, so I think that's okay. The error message I think is all right for now. And then, okay, so now we have to change a little bit here in this main function. So let's go ahead and use our new class to do pretty much what we did before, but just make it a little bit more nice and modular. So what we'll do is we'll create a hashtag list here. We'll, I guess, create it as, let's say Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and Bernie Sanders. And let's see, so we can also say, let's define our fetch tweets file name as, let's just call it tweets.json. So again, as we saw from the output of the terminal, those tweets, the braced objects, they can be formatted as JSON. It's a little bit easier for us to deal with that format if we want to read it in later. You could put .txt there, it's totally fine, but I'm just changing the extension to JSON. It's not necessary if you don't want to do that. Okay, so now let's define a Twitter streamer object. So I'll say Twitter streamer is equal to Twitter streamer, and then we'll say Twitter streamer, there it is, dot stream tweets, which is the method that we created up above, and we'll send it takes two things: the file name that we want to write to, and then also the list of keywords that we're looking for. So that just made that a little bit more concise and everything a little bit more modular, and that will kind of get us started on this whole streaming tweets thing. So in subsequent videos, we'll go ahead and look at precisely what data do we get from these tweets, and we'll see if we can do some interesting analysis on these tweets as well. So thanks again for watching. Stay tuned. Please let me know if you have any feedback, comments. Subscriptions are appreciated, comments are appreciated. So any of those things, please let me know. And thanks again for watching. Have a great day. Bye.